Part V, Chapter I, Section 2, of Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Translated by Constance Garnett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part V, Chapter I, Section 2. Lebeziatnikov was enraged. "That's another slander," he yelled. "It was not so at all. That was all Katerina Ivanovna's invention, for she did not understand. And I never made love to Sofya Semyonovna. I was simply developing her, entirely disinterestedly, trying to rouse her to protest. All I wanted was her protest, and Sofya Semyonovna could not have remained here anyway." "Have you asked her to join your community?" "Oh, you keep on laughing, and very inappropriately, allow me to tell you. You don't understand. There is no such rôle in a community. The community's established that there should be no such rôles. In a community such a rôle is essentially transformed, and what is stupid here is sensible there. What under present conditions is unnatural becomes perfectly natural in the community. It all depends on the environment. It's all the environment and man himself is nothing. And I am on good terms with Sofya Semyonovna to this day, which is a proof that she never regarded me as having wronged her. I am trying now to attract her to the community, but on quite a different footing. What are you laughing at? We are trying to establish a community of our own, a special one, on a broader basis. We have gone further in our convictions. We rejoice more. And meanwhile I'm still developing Sofya Semyonovna. She has a beautiful, beautiful character." "And you take advantage of her fine character, eh?" "No, no. Oh no, on the contrary." "Oh, on the contrary. A queer thing to say." "Believe me, why should I disguise it? In fact, I feel it strange myself how timid, chaste and modern she is with me." "And you, of course, are developing her." "Trying to prove to her that all that modesty is nonsense?" "Not at all, not at all! How coarsely, how stupidly excuse me saying so you misunderstand the word development. Good heavens, how crude you still are! We are striving for the freedom of women and you have only one idea in your head. Setting aside the general question of chastity and feminine modesty as useless in themselves and indeed prejudices, I fully accept her chastity with me, because that's for her to decide. Of course, if she were to tell me herself that she wanted me, I should think myself very lucky, because I like the girl very much. But as it is, no one has ever treated her more courteously than I, with more respect for her dignity. I wait in hopes, that's all." "You had much better make her a present of something. I bet you never thought of that." "You don't understand, as I've told you already. Of course she is in such a position, but it's another question. Quite another question. You simply despise her. Seeing a fact which you mistakenly consider deserving of contempt, you refuse to take a humane view of a fellow creature. You don't know what a character she is. I am only sorry that of late she has quite given up reading and borrowing books. I used to lend them to her. I am sorry too that with all the energy and resolution in protesting, which she has already shown once, she has little self-reliance, little, so to say, independence, so as to break free from certain prejudices and certain foolish ideas. Yet she thoroughly understands some questions, for instance about kissing of hands, that is, that it's an insult to a woman for a man to kiss her hand, because it's a sign of inequality. We had a debate about it, and I described it to her. She listened attentively to an account of the workmen's associations in France too. Now I am explaining the question of coming into the room in the future society." "And what's that, pray?" "We had a debate lately on the question: has a member of the community the right to enter another member's room, whether man or woman, at any time? And we decided that he has." "It might be at an inconvenient moment." Lebeziatnikov was really angry. "You are always thinking of something unpleasant," he cried with aversion. "Foo! How vexed I am that when I was expounding our system, I referred prematurely to the question of personal privacy. It's always a stumbling block to people like you, they turn it into ridicule before they understand it. And how proud they are of it too! Foo! I've often maintained that that question should not be approached by a novice till he has a firm faith in the system. And tell me, please, what do you find so shameful even in cesspools? I should be the first to be ready to clean out any cesspool you like. And it's not a question of self-sacrifice, it's simply work, honourable, useful work which is as good as any other and much better than the work of a Raphael and a Pushkin, because it is more useful." "And more honourable? More honourable? He he he! What do you mean by more honourable? I don't understand such expressions to describe human activity. More honourable, nobler, all those are old‐fashioned prejudices which I reject. Everything which is of use to mankind is honourable. I only understand one word, useful. You can snigger as much as you like, but that's so." Pyotr Petrovitch laughed heartily. He had finished counting the money and was putting it away. But some of the notes he left on the table. The cesspool question had already been a subject of dispute between them. What was absurd was that it made Lebeziatnikov really angry, while it amused Luzhin, and at that moment he particularly wanted to anger his young friend. "It's your ill luck yesterday that makes you so ill‐humoured and annoying," blurted out Lebeziatnikov, who in spite of his independence and his protests did not venture to oppose Pyotr Petrovitch, and still behaved to him with some of the respect habitual in earlier years. "You'd better tell me this," Pyotr Petrovitch interrupted with haughty displeasure. "Can you, or rather are you really friendly enough with that young person to ask her to step in here for a minute? I think they've all come back from the cemetery. I heard the sound of steps. I want to see her, that young person." "What for?" Lebeziatnikov asked with surprise. "Oh, I want to. I am leaving here to day or to morrow, and therefore I wanted to speak to her about... However, you may be present during the interview. It's better you should be, indeed, for there's no knowing what you might imagine." "I shan't imagine anything. I only asked, and, if you've anything to say to her, nothing is easier than to call her in. I'll go directly and you may be sure I won't be in your way." 5 minutes later Lebeziatnikov came in with Sonia. She came in very much surprised and overcome with shyness as usual. She was always shy in such circumstances and was always afraid of new people. She had been as a child and was even more so now. Pyotr Petrovitch met her politely and affably, but with a certain shade of his bantering familiarity which in his opinion was suitable for a man of his respectability and weight in dealing with a creature so young and so... interesting as she. He hastened to reassure her and made her sit down facing him at the table. Sonia sat down, looked about her, at Lebeziatnikov, at the notes lying on the table, and then again at Pyotr Petrovitch, and her eyes remained riveted on him. Lebeziatnikov was moving to the door. Pyotr Petrovitch signed to Sonia to remain seated and stopped Lebeziatnikov. "Is Raskolnikov in there? Has he come?" he asked him in a whisper. "Raskolnikov? Yes. Why? Yes, he is there. I saw him just come in. Why?" "Well, I particularly beg you to remain here with us and not to leave me alone with this... young woman. I only want a few words with her, but God knows what they may make of it. I shouldn't like Raskolnikov to repeat anything. You understand what I mean?" "I understand." Lebeziatnikov saw the point. "Yes, you are right. Of course I am convinced personally that you have no reason to be uneasy, but still you are right. Certainly I'll stay. I'll stand here at the window and not be in your way. I think you are right." Pyotr Petrovitch returned to the sofa, sat down opposite Sonia, looked attentively at her, and assumed an extremely dignified, even severe expression, as much as to say, "Don't you make any mistake, madam." Sonia was overwhelmed with embarrassment. "In the first place, Sofya Semyonovna, will you make my excuses to your respected mamma? That's right, isn't it? Katerina Ivanovna stands in the place of a mother to you," Pyotr Petrovitch began with great dignity, though affably. It was evident that his intentions were friendly. "Quite so, yes. The place of a mother," Sonia answered, timidly and hurriedly. "Then will you make my apologies to her? Through inevitable circumstances I am forced to be absent and shall not be at the dinner in spite of your mamma's kind invitation." "Yes, I'll tell her at once." And Sonia hastily jumped up from her seat. "Wait, that's not all," Pyotr Petrovitch detained her, smiling at her simplicity and ignorance of good manners. "And you know me little, my dear Sofya Semyonovna, if you suppose I would have ventured to trouble a person like you for a matter of so little consequence affecting myself only. I have another object." Sonia sat down hurriedly. Her eyes rested again for an instant on the grey and rainbow coloured notes that remained on the table. But she quickly looked away and fixed her eyes on Pyotr Petrovitch. She felt it horribly indecorous, especially for her to look at another person's money. She stared at the gold eyeglass which Pyotr Petrovitch held in his left hand and at the massive and extremely handsome ring with a yellow stone on his middle finger. But suddenly she looked away and, not knowing where to turn, ended by staring Pyotr Petrovitch again straight in the face. After a pause of still greater dignity, he continued: "I chanced yesterday, in passing, to exchange a couple of words with Katerina Ivanovna, poor woman. That was sufficient to enable me to ascertain that she is in a position preternatural, if one may so express it." "Yes, preternatural," Sonia hurriedly assented. "Or it would be simpler and more comprehensible to say, ill." "Yes, simpler and more yes, ill." "Quite so. So then, from a feeling of humanity and, so to speak, compassion, I should be glad to be of service to her in any way, foreseeing her unfortunate position. I believe the whole of this poverty-stricken family depends now entirely on you." "Allow me to ask," Sonia rose to her feet, "did you say something to her yesterday of the possibility of a pension? Because she told me you had undertaken to get her one. Was that true?" "Not in the slightest. And indeed it's an absurdity. I merely hinted at her obtaining temporary assistance as the widow of an official who had died in the service, if only she has patronage. But apparently your late parent had not served his full term and had not indeed been in the service at all of late. In fact, if there could be any hope, it would be very ephemeral, because there would be no claim for assistance in that case, far from it. And she is dreaming of a pension already, he he! A go-ahead lady!" "Yes, she is. For she is credulous and good‐hearted, and she believes everything from the goodness of her heart, and she is like that, yes. You must excuse her," said Sonia, and again she got up to go. "But you haven't heard what I have to say." "No, I haven't heard," muttered Sonia. "Then sit down." She was terribly confused. She sat down again a third time. "Seeing her position with her unfortunate little ones, I should be glad, as I have said before, so far as lies in my power, to be of service, that is, so far as is in my power, not more. One might, for instance, get up a subscription for her, or a lottery, something of the sort, such as is always arranged in such cases by friends or even outsiders desirous of assisting people. It was of that I intended to speak to you. It might be done." "Yes, yes, God will repay you for it," faltered Sonia, gazing intently at Pyotr Petrovitch. "It might be, but we will talk of it later. We might begin it to day. We will talk it over this evening and lay the foundations, so to speak. Come to me at 7 o'clock. Mr. Lebeziatnikov, I hope, will assist us. But there is one circumstance of which I ought to warn you beforehand and for which I venture to trouble you, Sofya Semyonovna, to come here. In my opinion, money cannot be, indeed it's unsafe to put it into Katerina Ivanovna's own hands. The dinner to-day is a proof of that. Though she has not, so to speak, a crust of bread for to‐morrow and, well, boots or shoes or anything, she has bought to‐day Jamaica rum, and even, I believe, Madeira and coffee. I saw it as I passed through. To‐morrow it will all fall upon you again, they won't have a crust of bread. It's absurd, really, and so, to my thinking, a subscription ought to be raised, so that the unhappy widow should not know of the money, but only you, for instance. Am I right?" "I don't know. This is only to‐day, once in her life. She was so anxious to do honour, to celebrate the memory, and she is very sensible, but just as you think, and I shall be very, very... they will all be... and God will reward... and the orphans..." Sonia burst into tears. "Very well then, keep it in mind. And now will you accept for the benefit of your relation the small sum that I am able to spare... from me personally. I am very anxious that my name should not be mentioned in connection with it. Here, having so to speak anxieties of my own, I cannot do more." And Pyotr Petrovitch held out to Sonia a 10 rouble note carefully unfolded. Sonia took it, flushed crimson, jumped up, muttered something and began taking leave. Pyotr Petrovitch accompanied her ceremoniously to the door. She got out of the room at last, agitated and distressed, and returned to Katerina Ivanovna, overwhelmed with confusion. All this time Lebeziatnikov had stood at the window or walked about the room, anxious not to interrupt the conversation. When Sonia had gone, he walked up to Pyotr Petrovitch and solemnly held out his hand. "I heard and saw everything," he said, laying stress on the last verb. "That is honourable, I mean to say it's humane. You wanted to avoid gratitude, I saw. And although I cannot, I confess, in principle sympathise with private charity, for it not only fails to eradicate the evil but even promotes it, yet I must admit that I saw your action with pleasure. Yes, yes, I like it." "That's all nonsense," muttered Pyotr Petrovitch, somewhat disconcerted. looking carefully at Lebeziatnikov. "No, it's not nonsense. A man who has suffered distress and annoyance as you did yesterday, and who yet can sympathize with the misery of others, such a man, even though he is making a social mistake, is still deserving of respect. I did not expect it indeed of you, Pyotr Petrovitch, especially as according to your ideas oh, what a drawback your ideas are to you! How distressed you are, for instance, by your ill luck yesterday!" cried the simple‐hearted Lebeziatnikov, who felt a return of affection for Pyotr Petrovitch. "And what do you want with marriage, with legal marriage, my dear noble Pyotr Petrovitch? Why do you cling to this legality of marriage? Well, you may beat me if you like, but I am glad, positively glad it hasn't come off, that you are free, that you are not quite lost for humanity. You see, I've spoken my mind." "Because I don't want in your free marriage to be made a fool of and to bring up another man's children, that's why I want legal marriage," Luzhin replied in order to make some answer. He seemed preoccupied by something. "Children? You referred to children," Lebeziatnikov started off like a war horse at the trumpet call. "Children are a social question, and a question of first importance, I agree, but the question of children has another solution. Some refuse to have children altogether because they suggest the institution of the family. We'll speak of children later, but now as to the question of honour, I confess that's my weak point. That horrid military Pushkin expression is unthinkable in the dictionary of the future. What does it mean indeed? It's nonsense. There will be no deception in a free marriage. That is only the natural consequence of a legal marriage, so to say, its corrective, a protest. So that indeed it's not humiliating, and if I ever, to suppose an absurdity, were to be legally married, I should be positively glad of it. I should say to my wife, 'My dear, hitherto I have loved you, now I respect you, for you've shown you can protest.' You laugh. That's because you are incapable of getting away from prejudices. Confound it all! I understand now where the unpleasantness is of being deceived in a legal marriage, but it's simply a despicable consequence of a despicable position, in which both are humiliated. When the deception is open, as in a free marriage, then it does not exist, it's unthinkable. Your wife will only prove how she respects you by considering you incapable of opposing her happiness and avenging yourself on her for her new husband. Damn it all! I sometimes dream if I were to be married foo, I mean if I were to marry legally or not, it's just the same. I should present my wife with a lover if she had not found one for herself. 'My dear,' I should say, 'I love you, but even more than that, I desire you to respect me.' See? Am I not right?" Pyotr Petrovitch sniggered as he listened, but without much merriment. He hardly heard it indeed. He was preoccupied with something else, and even Lebeziatnikov at last noticed it. Pyotr Petrovitch seemed excited and rubbed his hands. Lebeziatnikov remembered all this and reflected upon it afterwards. End of Part 5, Chapter 1. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.